Chase, how you doing on this Monday morning?
Doing well, Travis. Looking forward to this basketball game tonight, but it's kind of a dreary day here in Tuscaloosa for sure. It's about poured last night.
Yeah, it's raining out that big green egg activity that Goodbread is very very proficient and does a lot of that grilling on that big green egg. It's almost big green egg season on a daily basis, isn't it?
It's getting there. It's getting there, but it'll be no egging tonight, that's for sure.
What's the best thing you cook on that big green egg of yours, Goodbread? I've got a thought on that, but tell me what you think or the feedback you get. The best thing Chase Goodbread cooks on that big green egg.
For me, it's the kebabs, which is they're actually kebabs are a little different because all the work is in the prep with those things. You know, getting them on the skewer and getting things chopped up is the real pain. You drop them on that grill and the work's pretty much done. Whereas most other things you cook on the egg, the work is in the smoking. But if 10 people are coming over to my place and I gotta wow them all, kebabs is kind of a go-to for me.
I've done that kebab bar that Goodbread will do over there at Casa de Goodbread, and it's fantastic. I will say this: the smoked macaroni and cheese, though, Chase, that seems to be a real winner for you. You know, you brought over a pan of that, I believe, for Thanksgiving last November, and we needed about 2 more pans of that. That's how quickly it went. That smoked mac and cheese.
Big hat tip to Malcolm Reed for that one. This barbecue pit master who's a YouTube star and has taught me a lot without even having to meet him.
Yeah, he's a great Twitter follow if you haven't done that, as a matter of fact. Hey, Chase, what we really had you on for today, believe it or not, is to talk some football. We've touched on this topic in the past. It's the now age-old debate about early entries into the NFL draft. Nick Saban was asked about it over the weekend following Alabama's second scrimmage of spring drills. It went from a rather, as I described it earlier, innocuous question in terms of how it's impacted Alabama moving forward, and it's gonna do it once again for 2019. To Nick offering some strong thoughts with a lot of indisputable facts in relation to guys coming out. And he didn't mention Ronnie Harrison by name, but certainly that's the player he was talking about from last year's draft class as a third rounder, who if he had stayed, might have been looking at a lot more money as a first rounder. Are we at the point where Nick's fighting a losing race there, running a losing race as far as guys making decisions not based on first-round money solely?
Maybe to some extent, and certainly if Alabama had 3 or 4 third-round picks in last year's draft, then his comments probably would have come off a little bit differently. But when you say I'm not mentioning any names, we had a third rounder, he might as well have said I'm not mentioning any names. But his name rhymes with Johnny Parison, you know.
Donnie Parison, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's obviously who he's talking about. Harrison he took exception to it on Twitter. Here's my thought. One, Saban's comments in a general sense were dead on accurate. There are plenty of guys who come out early, don't get drafted. Plenty of guys who come out early, get drafted late when they could have hung around and gotten drafted a lot higher. That's indisputable. But I thought Harrison was probably a ham-handed example for Saban to use for a couple of reasons. Number one of his primary points was that a lot of these guys that come out early never get to the second contract. That's really the lure these days. That's how the agents get these guys to come out early. They say, look, it's a short career. Come out as quick as you can. You get to that second contract and break the bank quicker. Well, Ronnie Harrison is going to get a second contract, barring a serious injury. I mean, look, he showed more than enough, I thought, with the Jaguars last year, developing into a starter, showing some pretty impressive week-to-week improvement. I know it ended with an injury, but I'm not betting against Ronnie Harrison getting a second NFL contract. So I'm not so sure Ronnie Harrison was the best poster child for Saban's comments. And Saban typically doesn't make a misstep like that in front of a microphone. But if we're talking about Saban's general point, he's unquestionably right.
Isn't it more of an issue, Chase, with the guys that go 6th, 7th round and drafted free agent than it is, say, a 2nd or 3rd rounder?
Yeah, and that goes to the same point as well. You're exactly right. I mean, it's not like Ronnie Harrison got peanuts as a 3rd rounder, and the guys that go undrafted, really the guys that go undrafted are altogether are the ones where we should all be scratching our heads in terms of the advice that some of these guys are getting. And look, if you come from a place where you've never had a dime and you've got a family and some sort of desperation, you can't blame these guys for even taking mid-round money, I don't think. But there are examples of guys who decide to come back and then reap the benefits of it. And Saban's pointed out a couple of those as well. Players who, had an opportunity to leave early, went ahead and decided to stick around and made some money by doing it, a lot more money.
Looking at this safety class, which Deonte Thompson declared early, although he did spend 4 years in the program, so he's not a 3-and-out guy. Looking at this safety class for this year, had Ronnie Harrison come back to school, stayed healthy, been productive, what would he look like maybe in this class compared to a year ago?
I think he would have been drafted higher. I don't think there's any question about it. He would have gone before the 3rd round. Don't know that he's the first safety off the board necessarily, but it's not looking like a great group of safeties in the draft this year. So yeah, I think if Ronnie Harrison had come back for another whirl with the Crimson Tide, played well, he'd be standing to make some more money. But does that mean he'd be making, top 10, top 20 money? Maybe not. Safeties generally aren't as hard to find. They're not as valued as corners. They're not as valued as some other positions. So, Harrison might in fact be a situation where getting to that second contract a year faster might end up being the right play for him.
Yeah, ask Landon Collins about that, right? Landon went the 2nd round and just got $45 million guaranteed from the Redskins. So, I agree. I don't think either is wrong in what they believe or what their opinion is of the situation. But what about Deonte Thompson? He's obviously had an injury issue in the draft process. Where does he kind of sit now with everything that's going on with him? I know Alabama recently had, a secondary pro day. Do you have an update on Deonte Thompson and maybe where he's at in this?
It definitely did not help him that he was not ready to go for his second pro day. That's what he was targeting. He injured that wrist in preparation for the combine. Gets to the combine, tells the media there that pro day's out, but April 2nd is the date he's got circled. April 2nd comes and goes, and he wasn't quite ready. So now if you're the NFL, you're looking at a guy who's got some impressive tape, certainly flashes on tape, maybe not the most consistent tape, but his ability to roam from sideline to sideline in pass coverage, get to the hash, get to the sideline, is impressive. But what's he run? Is he faster than this guy who ran a 4.5 at the combine? Is he faster than that guy who we like a lot? You just don't know because he wasn't able to put a time down for a 40-yard dash. And look, at safety, a 40-yard dash is fairly important. It's not like, it's practically meaningless for offensive linemen. For safeties, it's not. So it didn't help him for sure. I think and now they probably, I would imagine that Deonte Thompson ran at Alabama's junior pro day last year before the season. But, had he, so there's a time for NFL clubs to lean on somewhere, but you definitely like to have one that's a lot more up to date than whatever they've got on Thompson. Won't help his draft stock, although I still expect there's a really good chance he'll be gone in the second day of the draft.
When you hear comments like Saban made on Saturday, do you think there was a little foreshadowing of this upcoming draft because he's got guys like Thompson and Mack Wilson in there, Chase? Or do you think it's maybe more about one over the other, or both? What do you think about that?
He's always speaking to the players he's got, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, and almost anything he says to the media, you can almost substitute it for a team room sometimes, and I think it's a constant message for him with his current players that, hey, the NFL grass might not always be greener as an underclassman. So we'll see what happens. Like any draft class, there'll be an example or two, I'm sure, of a couple of underclassmen that went out early under maybe a questionable circumstance, and it turned out to be a smart move. Like, for instance, Landon Collins, as you mentioned, and there maybe a guy or two that goes out early, and it's the other way around. So it's all about who you want to highlight, and the agents are going to want to highlight situations like Collins, and Nick Saban's going to want to highlight somebody else who maybe made a bad decision.
Chase, we spoke last time, I believe. I put the over-under for Alabama first-round picks in 2020 at 5.5. You went under on that. Are you sticking with the under, Goodbread?
Sticking with it. Gotta stick with it. Yeah, it's 6 is a bunch. 6 is a lot for sure, and it's going to be a huge Alabama draft.
Yeah.
What's that?
Half dozen, they call that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge Alabama draft class, but you're talking about, almost 20% of the class from one school. Of course, Miami's got the record. It was 6 guys in 2004, not all of whom ended up being NFL stars, but I'll have to stick with the under for now. Although if you'd have made that thing 4.5, good chance I'd have gone over. 5.5, got to go under.
Got to give you a hook one way or the other on that one,
Yeah.
Rusty hook. Chase, as we let you go, another big number that could transpire coming up in a couple weeks up in Nashville. 4 first-rounders for Alabama for a third straight year. We talked about this on your last visit. What are you thinking as of now, given the last few weeks in the process, as far as Alabama being able to hit that number for a third straight year?
Yeah, I think Irv Smith is your swing man for that. Definitely feel like Damian Harris is probably a second-round pick or a second-day guy. Irv Smith can sneak into that first round. If he does, then you're looking at that big 4 again for Alabama. If he doesn't, then it'll be 3. But certainly, the 2 Williams and Jacobs look like 3 strong candidates, probably close to locks as there could be, and Irv Smith is going to serve as the maybe for now going into the draft. We'll see, but he's a talent. He can do a lot after the catch and be explosive in the passing game, which I know a lot of teams covet at that position in the NFL these days. So if he goes late first round, I imagine he'll be number 4.
With Gronk retiring, maybe Irv Smith Jr. in that 32 hole to the Pats there at the end of the first round. Hey, one thing we can say as we wrap up, Chase, regardless of Nick Saban's thoughts, it doesn't impact the support that we've seen from Saban and the Alabama program to all these guys that decide to take the plunge. I can't remember a pro day at Alabama where Saban or there were some players from the Alabama contingent that maybe didn't have that blessing that we've talked about in the past, that you still didn't see at pro day or you still didn't see around the facility, right? It doesn't go to that extent in terms of what he believes versus what his players ultimately do.
No, it doesn't. And Saban made the point the other day that once these players make that decision, it's in the best interest of the program for them to get drafted as high as possible. So from that standpoint, there's nothing to do but root for them to go as early as possible, because they like to put those NFL draft picks in the media guide real good, Travis. The color photos and page one if they can, right? So it makes a difference.
Those tweets. I don't see that Team GPA tweet all that much, but I see a lot of those first round tweets, Chase. See a lot of those,
Flip to the index in the back. You'll figure out where those GPAs are,
Those APR rankings. Yeah. Hey, Chase, as always, we appreciate it, my man. Look forward to your work at NFL.com, Crimson Cover Television on Friday nights, and, of course, our podcast, Talkin Tide. Chase Goodbread and myself do that on a regular basis as well. Thanks a lot, Chase.
All right, Travis. Thanks.